All right, good morning. This is Miss Cannon, and I'm going to lecture on Rome, the Senate, through the collapse of the Republic. So, what you need to remember about the Senate in Rome is that it is going to consist of the aristocracy. The wealthy are going to be in the Senate. Remember that it's picked by those elite families are participating in the Senate, the people who are wealthy. So they're probably the patricians who are participating. Now, they handle the legislative and administrative duties in the Senate. There are 300 members, and they serve for life, which is very similar to what we have with our Supreme Court, how they serve for life. And eventually, they will allow the plebeians to participate as well, because remember, the plebeians had a larger population. Please place a star in your notes next to eventually they will allow the plebeians to participate. And one thing that I would like for you to do as well is draw an arrow from wealthy to aristocratic branch, because they are the aristocracy, which means they are the wealthy. So draw an arrow from wealthy to aristocracy, and then also make sure you put a box or a star next to the plebeians were allowed to participate. When we talk about the assembly, there will be, this is more of a democratic branch. This is where you're getting more voting and things like that. So there are two branches of the assembly, and there will be the centuriate assembly, which is controlled by the plebeians, and they will be elected, they pick the consuls, and then you will have the tribal assembly, which is controlled by the patricians, and those are elected, they elect the tribunes, and they made the laws. Now, a dictator. One thing that every person in like 2014 associates with a dictator is individuals that we have in our society now. But the original method of having a dictator was not to completely take control of the civilization and run it forever and what they say goes, but usually a dictator was only appointed in a time during a crisis, and they had absolute power, and they only reigned for 6 months. And they were chosen by the consuls, and then they were elected by the Senate. So one thing that you understand is that this person only serves for 6 months. Why is that? Why do you think they only serve for 6 months? Okay, it's because 6 months is not a lot of time to do damage. 6 months is good enough to handle the crisis, but then to go ahead and go back to your normal life and let the Republic and the rest of the Senate and all that go back into play. And so dictators were usually military leaders. We have a great example in Rome of Cincinnatus, who was a farmer, worked on a plantation. He was a former general, and he took over Rome as dictator for a while, fought battles, and then once the crisis had been alleviated, Cincinnatus went back to his farm. And so what you need to understand, and that's one big thing that you need to put, is that this dictator, you need to put that is only appointed during a crisis, and you need to put a box around the fact that their reign is for 6 months. They only reign for 6 months. Now, moving on to the military. All citizens who owned land had to serve in the military. They trained to form Roman legions. What you need to understand is that legions were made of 5,000 soldiers, and legions divided into sections of 80 men called a century. Okay? Make sure you write that down. It's very important. And when we talk about Roman legions, we're going to talk about Caesar and his legions that he led into Gaul. Now, Rome starts out as a civilization in the middle of Italy. Remember that it's between the Alps and the southern tip of Italy, and it's in the perfect location surrounded by mountains and oceans and all that stuff. But as you know, with any civilization, that they always want to grow and expand and create empires because they're more powerful. So what you need to understand is that Romans are going to move throughout Italy, subduing one rival after another. So what they'll do is they'll take over the Greeks. They'll go over after the Etruscans, who live in the north. And one thing that will happen is that they'll do is they don't tell everyone that it's their way or the highway. One thing they do is they say, listen, we're going to take you over and we've conquered you, but you can still operate in the same systems that you were doing before, but you will pay taxes to Rome, and you will supply soldiers. So you just have to keep that in mind, that they take these systems over, or these areas over, but they're going to let them run as business as usual, but they will ultimately still have to pay taxes to Rome. Now, there's a couple awesome things about Rome, and you've realized this because you know they're on the water. They can trade. Remember that their location is very easy to access. And they, for traveling from one place to another, guys, they traded wine and olives for other goods. But there is a problem. Um, the problem will be that there's other powerful groups who were interfering with Rome's monopoly, which a monopoly is like they had complete control or they were running the show, on the Mediterranean Sea. And this group is called Carthage. Next to the word Carthage, I want you to write Africa. Next to the word Carthage, you need to write Africa, okay? And you need to also make sure that you put a box around Rome having a monopoly on the Mediterranean Sea. Put a box around it right now, please. Now, here you go. So if you're looking at this map here in this area, here is Rome, okay? And by 117 CE, if you notice, these darker areas was all of the Roman Empire, okay? Lighter areas are not. And the issue, and where I want you to notice, is that this is where Carthage is located. So it's in northern Africa, because this area is Africa, Europe, Asia, Middle East, don't forget. And they are going to have some, I don't know if you would describe it as jealousy, but they're going to have some hatred towards Rome, and they're not going to agree with the fact that they have a monopoly on the Mediterranean Sea, and they're going to and fro. And if you realize, all the coastal regions that touch the Mediterranean Sea belong to Rome. Now, as you know, there will be a war, because if anybody's not getting along, you know everybody gets physical with it. So what you understand is that the Punic Wars are going to be the war over trading routes in the Mediterranean Sea. There were 3 wars that were fought, and what you understand is that these wars are going to be Rome versus Carthage. So underneath or across from Punic Wars, you need to write Rome versus Carthage. You need to do that right now. Do it now, because we're going to be looking for it in your note sheet. So there are 3 wars that are fought. The first war is fought in 264 BCE. It was fought over Sicily, which is an island, and it lasted for 23 years. It's a long time, guys. It's a long time. And they're going back and forth, fighting over these trade routes. Now, you have to understand that Carthage kind of picks this fight with Rome, but in the first war, Rome wins. Now, in the second war, it will be in 218 BCE. Now, Carthage takes over a Roman ally, and so they take over this Roman ally, which means that this area probably belongs to Rome. And so Carthage is getting aggressive, and they're trying to say, hey, look, this isn't over. You thought you won the first one. Well, we're going to start another one. So they attack. This war lasts about 16 years, and Rome wins again. And what's going to happen in the third war is that Carthage begins to prosper, and Rome does not like this, so they completely destroy them. So I'm going to go back to the Second Punic War really quick and tell you a story about Hannibal. Hannibal is an African general, and he is going to absolutely despise the fact that Rome is so prosperous and that they're taking and monopolizing all this trade. So Hannibal takes his army and war elephants from Africa, and he brings them to Rome, and he comes over, crosses the Alps mountains with war elephants to fight Carthage. But ultimately what happens is that the Romans realize that he's on his way, and they send their armies and troops to Carthage to attack and kill his family and the people of Carthage. And so Hannibal ultimately has to head back to save his land. Now, when we get to the third war, as you can see, Carthage begins to prosper again. They're living well after this second war. And ultimately, Rome's like, you know what? You're just not going to even get a chance to uprise again. So what they do is they enslave their people. They kill a whole bunch of them, and they take, like, I think 50,000 to 500,000 people into slavery. And then they destroy and salt their fields. And why would you salt somebody's field? What do you do if you put salt on somebody's soil? What do you do to it? You're killing the fertility. Very good. What I would like for you to do is underneath the Third Punic War, I need you to add that they salted their fields and they enslaved their people. Add it to your notes. Moving on. So Carthage, what happened to them? Like I said, the Romans, they burned their city. They salted their farmlands. 50,000 citizens were sold into slavery. And now it's going to become a Roman African province. So that means a province. Next to the word province, you need to write state, because what that means is that this area is going to belong to Rome. And Rome is going to go on to conquer other areas such as Macedonia. Remember, that's where Alexander the Great came from. Greece and Anatolia, which Anatolia is near Turkey, or it's in Turkey, I believe. Yeah, somewhere on that, in the Middle Eastern area. And so just keep that in mind, that Rome is going to start to show people, like, we are not a group to be messed with. Either you get with us or you're against us, and if you're against us, we will destroy you. So one thing you have to think about is that Carthage was kind of made an example of don't mess with Rome. Do as the Romans do, okay? Moving on. So, once again, here's the map of the empire just to keep you familiar. Here's Carthage right here. Sicily is this island. Macedonia. Let's see. They took over Mesopotamia, Armenia. Remember, this will be France later, Britain. This will be Spain. And this is the coast of Africa as well as Egypt. Take a look, guys. This is huge during this time. Now, one thing that you understand is that expansion can create a problem. It is too big. Huge gaps between the rich and poor socially during this time. And the government, guys, the government and the wealthy are extremely corrupt, which, I mean, we see as we've learned about civilizations, you notice that a lot of times if wealthy people are in control of things, which is, it's not always bad, but sometimes there's no one to hold them accountable, so corruption can happen. If there's no checks and balances in the government, there's no system to hold people accountable and to not let one group get too ambitious, there can be corruption. So what does this lead to? The collapse of the republic, okay? So what happens is that the Gracchus brothers, once this republic crashes, which remember that the idea of a republic is very feasible. You pick your representation, they make laws, you pass the laws, all that. But one thing you have to understand is that anytime there's corruption, then the government systems can't work. Any type of system can't work if you have corruption. It's based on an honor system. So what's going to happen is that the Gracchus brothers are going to take over for a short period of time. And what happens is they're going to try to put some reforms in place. Next to the word reforms, put in parentheses, change. And they're going to take land from the wealthy and give it to the poor. I would like for you to put a star and put Robin Hood complex. Robin Hood complex, because they're very similar to Robin Hood, where they take from the wealthy and they give to the poor. Now, here's what's going to happen to the Gracchus brothers, though. Wealthy senators are not going to dig them taking this land and giving it to the poor, because that's going to directly affect them. So what they do is murder them, okay? They kill these men. And this starts a civil war. And if you're not really clear on a civil war, which some of you may not be and some of you may, I'm still going to have you write this. Next to civil war, you must say a war with a nation, like a nation within itself. They're fighting each other. So put a note there about how civil wars are nations fighting within themselves. Now, after this, during the Civil War, there will be changes in the military. Generals, guys, would try to gain more power by bribing the poor with food and land, and say, listen, I'll give you food, I'll give you land if you support me in the military. If you join the military, if you support us in battle, we will give you food and land. And so that's how they gained the poor's full support, because remember, the poor were starving and didn't have anywhere to live, or were in ownership to other people, or things like that. So you have to keep in mind that this will benefit the poor, and the poor this is a widespread appeal to them. Food, land. That's all anybody wants during this time. Now, the last thing you have to understand is that Sulla will come into power. And he is the type of individual who will kill anyone who opposes him. And and we've learned about this with leaders. Leaders always kill opposition or rebellion to maintain power. Please write a note and say that rulers may kill people who oppose them, or rebellions to maintain power. Also add that they do this to set an example. Add that to your notes right now. Now, what we will start off with tomorrow is the rise of Julius Caesar, which it's very interesting. And Julius Caesar is a very interesting individual, and we will pick up with that on Monday. If you missed anything, if you did not mark everything that I told you to in your notes, please go back and do so, because we will be looking for it. And last but not least, at the end, put a smiley face. Have a great Friday.